leeway, we can go ahead and get started. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. This presentation is being recorded. You will receive a link to that recording as well as a copy of the materials after we have finished today. So if you need to leave early, no problem, and no need to take scribbled notes, as we'll get you all of those materials. We do have a chat and Q&A section, so if you've got any questions, feel free to stick that in the Q&A on your screen, and I will try to get to as many as we can. And I think we can go ahead and get started. So a little bit about Multnomah Group before we get into the meat of the presentation today. We are an independent retirement plan consulting firm. That is the core of our business. We serve about 173 clients across about 283 plans with 33 billion in total plan assets. We are currently in the midst of celebrating our 20-year anniversary. You'll see that on our signatures if you get any emails from anyone over here at Multnomah Group. We have several consultants across a handful of states and serve clients in 16 states across the country. I am Haley Fields. I am a principal and consultant here with Multnomah Group. I am working out of our Portland headquarters, and I lead our vendor services committee. So that group is responsible for all of the record keeper due diligence for our clients. So we handle meetings with record keepers, understanding their services and capabilities. We also conduct all of our request for proposal or RFP projects. And we do our annual fee benchmarking, which is what we are here to talk about today. We do that each year in the second quarter. Those reports are delivered to clients. We are working on them all throughout the first quarter and a half of the year. We'll talk about why fee benchmarking is important, why we take the time to do it each year, some key results we saw from the 2023 data. We'll talk a little bit about peer groups and how we assign those and why we think they're important. Talk about what you can do if your plan expenses are outside of that peer range. There's a handful of options and opportunities there. Talk a little bit about why you may want to conduct a record keeper search and why you may want to do that even if your fees are in range. And then we'll look at a few ways that record keepers generate profits beyond just the direct record keeping fee that they receive through their relationship with the plan. So why do we take the time to do this? Why do we do this for each of our clients each year? And ultimately, this is because fees are one of the most important duties you have as a fiduciary to a plan. So the Employee Retirement Income Security Act in 1974, commonly called ERISA, is the body of law that governs benefit plans and, of course, retirement plans. And that requires a plan fiduciary to ensure that fees paid out of the plan are reasonable in light of services rendered. There is no requirement to have the least expensive plan. ERISA is a process law. So what you need to do is to ensure that you can show the Department of Labor or whoever else might come knocking that you have gone through a process to review fees compared to services and ensure that they are reasonable given the current marketplace. This continues to be a focus of the Department of Labor, certainly a review as part of their audits, but it's also been a focus of lawsuits against plans. So we've seen excessive fee cases really proliferate over the last few years, focused not only on the cost of investments, which is a critical component, but also the fees associated with record keeping. Those of you who may have plans that are not subject to ERISA, or perhaps you pay for fees directly rather than through the plan, this is less critical, but certainly an important part of your work. You want to make sure that the fees you pay are reasonable just for the organization's pocketbook and the fiduciary responsibility you have to the organization, but also those governmental folks who are not subject to ERISA are subject to state law, and that may have requirements around the duty and prudence of fees. So really, this is an important critical component for the running of any retirement plan that you may have. So how can you go about monitoring fees, right? You've got this fee, you are one plan, You've got exactly one data point. What do you do to ensure that your fees are reasonable given the marketplace? So there are a handful of options from easiest but least precise to most difficult but more precise. So we'll begin with your basic fee benchmarking study. That is the work that we do for all of our clients each year. We take a look at really two pieces of your retirement plan, the number of participants with an account balance and the average account balance. We stick you in a peer group range of plans that are in similar size, and we compare your fee to what we would expect the fee to be received if you were to go out to market. So that does not take into account any specifics of your plan. Maybe you have a plan that needs a lot of on-site education days. That's something that your employee population requires, and that is likely to cost a little bit more. Or maybe you have a plan that has some complex testing needs, right? And so you need to do more testing than an average plan. Again, this cannot capture the specifics of your plan and the specifics of the services required of your plan. So the ranges tend to be relatively broad to try and capture all of those potential variants. A slightly more precise method for checking fees is to do a request for bid. So that would incorporate a couple of additional plan-specific pieces of information. Plan asset levels, how the investments are allocated, and some plan design information. And that can get you more precise information, but again, doesn't encapsulate all of the various pieces of your retirement plan that a record keeper would need to know in order to accurately price your plan. So a request for bid is a step between a fee benchmarking study and a full request for proposal. That request for proposal, a vendor search, whatever you'd like to call it, I'll use those terms interchangeably, is the most sort of comprehensive provider search that you can do. You'll provide record keepers who propose a variety of pieces of information about your plan, questions specific to your needs and requirements, including perhaps specifics you need for your service level agreement, specifics on the amount of education and interaction that participants will need, all sorts of detailed pieces of information that will then go to a competitive market, and you will receive real live bids for the record keeping administration of your plan. That, of course, is a relatively time-intensive process, not only for the plan sponsor, but also for whoever you have hired or delegated to run that search. And so while it is the most exacting, it is also not something that you're going to do every year, which is why we think in between searches, and we do recommend searches are conducted every 5 to 7 years, as tends to be the industry standard. Between those searches, you do this basic fee benchmarking study to ensure that as the market changes and moves, and we are still seeing fee compression, you're staying up to date with that market. So I talked a little bit about this already, but what is a peer group range? And that is the group of plans that we compare your plan to. Plans of varying sizes pay different amounts. I think that's relatively obvious. Multnomah Group, in our proprietary fee benchmarking, uses peer ranges that are based on two separate pieces of information. The number of participants in your plan, that's a good proxy for record keepers to know what kind of utilization they'll get from their website and their call center, what level of transaction and distributions they'll need. It really relates directly to what the cost to the record keeper will be for running that plan. The second piece that we use is the average account balance. And that is, again, a proxy for the total size of the plan. You could have a $50 million plan with 1,000 people, or you could have a $50 million plan with 30 people. And those are going to have very different structures and very different margins for a record keeper. So we do think that average account balance is a really critical component of how record keepers price their plan. In our conversations with record keepers, those are the two most important pieces they need to know in order to provide a bid or a proposal for providing record keeping and administration to a plan. So we've put folks into peer ranges based on those number of participants and average account balance. And now we are going to compare that to what we believe you would receive as competitive bids in an open marketplace. We are not comparing plan pricing to what an average plan pays, and we are not comparing that pricing to what sort of the rest of our clients are paying. What we are comparing you to is really an estimate to the very best of our ability of where the marketplace is at today. Many of our competitors are using similar structures, but most typically we see, again, that compared to an average pricing. 401k Averages book does very similar benchmarking we've seen from them. Some of our fiduciary liability partners have also provided similar ranges using, again, average account balance and total number of participants. And we think that has become an industry standard. But where we think differentiate ourselves is really looking at where the marketplace is at today. But we can never completely factor in unique plan designs and features and service qualities, and that's a critical component of this balance. You can go for fewer services, more do-it-yourself and pay less, or you can go for a more high-touch service model with more robust services and experiences for the plan sponsor and the participants and pay more. So that's the record keeping fee specifically. But what we have seen continually from record keepers, from the marketplace, from our conversations with those record keepers, is that there are other levers with which they can generate revenue, and that can have a direct impact on their stated record keeping fee. So there are many ways with which record keepers can make additional revenue from their relationship with the plan. We've highlighted what we think are the 5 most common here. I'll go through those in a little bit of detail. So proprietary investment management, the actual investment management of products available in the plan. So you could use, for example, your Record Keepers target date series. For folks who work with Multnomah Group and our Multnomah Group clients, you may have some proprietary investments in your plan. I think the good news here from our perspective is that those products go through all of the same monitoring and due diligence that any of the other investments in your plan go through. So we want to make sure that you are covered from a fiduciary standpoint if you are using proprietary investment management, because that is a focus of both the Department of Labor, but also excessive fee cases. We don't want it to appear as if a plan sponsor has selected a proprietary investment solely because their record keeper requested it. We want to make sure that you've gone through a separate process to confirm that that is a prudent option for your participants. Managed accounts continue to become more and more popular. For folks who aren't familiar with that product, it's essentially a robo-advisor that a participant can opt into. That's typically how it's structured, is an additional service provided by the record keeper. If a participant wants help with their investments and with their account, they can opt in to this managed account service. They give the service, whether through the web or through a call center or through a one-on-one, some additional information about themselves, their goals, their timeline for retirement. Maybe they have a spouse or additional outside assets. All of that information gets put into a system, which then spits out an investment recommendation for them, typically a total contribution amount recommendation. And then that managed account will rebalance the participant's asset allocation as the market shifts. So maybe you come up with a 60-40 portfolio using a handful of the investments in the plan. As the market moves and that maybe gets out of alignment, the managed account program will reallocate those amounts for participants. So it's considered a more customized option than what you would see with perhaps a target date series. Managed accounts do cost money. They are typically those fees are only paid by participants who have opted into the program. And what we've seen is generally the record keeper takes a portion of that total cost. The next option are IRA rollovers. So many record keepers have their own retail IRA products, and they may see participants who leave a plan roll into a proprietary IRA. I don't think that's necessarily a sign of something bad. I think if you have a good experience with Record Keeper A and decide that when you leave the plan, you want to stay with Record Keeper A, I think maybe that's a vote of confidence for the quality of those services. But what plan sponsors should be thinking about and monitoring here is how are those conversations happen? Are record keepers using this special relationship with participants that they have with their relationship with the plan in order to incentivize IRA rollover? So you want to be really clear on what education or advice participants are getting as part of a distribution discussion with your record keeper. We also want to be clear on what information about participants record keepers are giving to other parts of their business. And that'll be important when we talk about cross-selling retail financial products as well. In addition to IRA services, many of these record keepers are large retail financial institutions. They have a whole host of products that may be beneficial to participants in your plan. So maybe they have a 529 plan program or an HSA or banking or insurance products. All of these, again, may be beneficial to participants. Folks need life insurance, generally speaking, but we want to make sure that plan sponsors are reviewing and discussing with their record keepers how those conversations will happen with participants so that you're able to monitor for any potential conflicts of interest. What you don't want to happen is to have a participant falsely believe that the retirement plan committee or the plan sponsor more generally has blessed these other services that you're not actually monitoring. And so again, you want to make sure that you understand how your participant data is being used for potential marketing sources and how those conversations and warm referrals are handled. Similarly, but less common, are annuitizations. So annuities, both in plan and out of plan, are getting a lot more news headlines recently as we've moved to making lifetime income more common and more available. They still tend to be relatively unpopular with participants when it actually comes to the point of annuitization, but they're a high margin business these days. And certainly as record keepers continue to create additional products that allow for lifetime income and annuitization, you again just want to understand how those conversations are presented to participants and how they're using that participant data to potentially incentivize annuitization within the plan, especially proprietary annuitization. So all this is to say, if your record keepers are doing any of these options, I don't think that's a bad thing in itself. What it requires is additional due diligence from the plan sponsor, from the committee. And Multnomah Group does assist with this. So our P benchmarking reports each year, clients who have seen these will remember this, include information on all of these options. We have not found a way so far, but continue to work on a way to give a specific dollar or participant number to that cross-selling feature. But it is something we continue to talk to record keepers about and understand what kind of reporting that they can provide to us. Not all record keepers are engaged in all of these 5 areas. So you want to make sure you understand which your record keeper has focused on. Another important piece of this is that some record keepers can offer breaks in total record keeping fees if you allow for some of these options. So if you opt for example, a proprietary target date fund or a proprietary general account fund, you might receive a discount on your total record keeping fee. Or if you offer managed accounts, that's a really common structure that we've seen, especially recently. We think it's really important that plan sponsors make the decision about the quality of those services separate from their discussion about the total record keeping fee. We want to make sure that you are comfortable and believe that the record keeping fee is prudent where it's at, and then you can review and understand whether these additional services or additional investment options are prudent for your participants. We want to make sure that those are separate and distinct discussions, and also separate and distinct discussions if you are in a search process and deciding between record keeper providers. So let's talk a little bit about our 2023 fee analysis. So we conducted a fee analysis for about 150 of our clients in 2023. Those reports are being provided to clients right now during this second quarter. And we saw a handful of trends that have continued really over the past few years. So the first and most important is that record keeping fees that can continue to compress across plan sizes. We are continuing to see lower and lower fees from micro plans up to mega plans. And as we updated our peer ranges, our vendor services committee met in March to reset those peer ranges. We saw broad declines really across that size spectrum. So fees continue to compress. If you haven't looked at your fees recently and haven't renegotiated them, it is possible that the market has moved under you. So it's worth taking another look. Fee negotiations have been tight. So as we've met with our clients and gone back to their record keepers to review fees and negotiate lower fees, negotiate folks back in the range, we have seen some difficulty with those conversations. And what we've really seen has been record keepers coming just inside of our peer ranges. That's not a range that we provide to record keepers. We don't want to negotiate against ourselves. Well, we are seeing offered fee reductions in the 1 to 2 basis points, $1 to $5 per participant, depending on how your fee is allocated. We're not seeing real substantive reductions. We, if folks who know us, work with a lot of 403B plans, along with 401k and other types of plans. But historically, we've seen 403B plans have higher fees than their 401k counterparts, mainly due to the fact that there are fewer service providers working with 403Bs than with 401ks. So we've seen a little bit less competition. We're beginning to see that trend adjust, and we're seeing 403B plans, especially large and mega 403B plans, come down to be more in line with the pricing of their 401k counterparts. The structure of 403B plans and the administration and compliance continues to look more and more like 401ks, so that we do believe this will continue. And we are beginning to see a little bit more competition in the 403B space, and that beginning to come down market. So I would expect 403B plans will continue to see pricing more in line with their 401k counterparts, which means maybe more substantive fee reductions on the 403B side. And we are seeing more managed account participants and assets. So those participant numbers and assets are increasing more quickly than plan counts. So we've seen in some cases managed accounts go from 5% of total plan assets up to 7 or 10% of total plan assets, and the fees continuing to increase as well. So certainly we've seen more folks move into managed accounts for a variety of reasons. They've become more available, they've become more well-known, and record keepers continue to focus on them as an option for participants. So if you offer managed accounts and you've seen, maybe 1 or 2% of your employee base using those, it's important that you continue to monitor that and continue to monitor how record keepers are advertising that option for participants. Some additional observations we've seen from this year, we've seen more plan sponsors opting for record keeper searches. I think that's coming from a couple of different places. One, we're seeing that the more proactive retention methods that record keepers had been doing through the pandemic starting in 2020 have begun to slow. For quite some time, very few plan sponsors wanted to take on the effort of a record keeper search. They were dealing with lots of other competing priorities and so record keepers were really just focused on retaining their current business. We've seen that slow as more plan sponsors have been willing to do these record keeper searches, and we've seen the retention, as I mentioned, the fee reductions as part of normal negotiations have really, really slowed as record keepers have focused on growing through sales rather than retaining current clients. We have seen that pricing from incumbents has been significantly reduced in a search compared to a non-search negotiation. So we have had clients and plans who received a bid for a fee reduction opted instead to do a full record keeper search. And when that happened, they received an even further reduction as a proposal from their current provider. That is not uncommon. We do expect that to continue as well. Another trend we've seen that has continued over the past several years is that this is a relatively margin-challenged business. Fees continue to compress, as we've discussed, and we've seen record keepers, as we've said, look for other revenue sources to make up some of that declining margin, but we've also seen really significant consolidation. So the number of providers 10 years ago was much larger than you would see today, and we do expect that consolidation to continue. Maintaining the breadth and scope needed to be successful in the record keeper business requires huge amounts of capital investment to stay top of the line for cybersecurity as a critically important piece, but also just the constantly evolving legislative landscape. So Secure 2.0 is a really good example. 90 provisions that record keepers had to build into their system, and that requires a pretty significant technology spend. And only the kinds of businesses that have, again, really large scope and scale are able to do that in a cost-effective manner. And some have opted to consolidate rather than sort of stand on their own or outsource. Frankly, we've seen a fair amount of outsourcing recently as well to, again, help with some of this margin. We have seen a focus on operational efficiencies and ways to cut costs. So some of that has been outsourcing. Some of that has been a move to more and more automation, which is good. That helps with making sure that record keeper errors are fewer and fewer, and projects move more quickly. But it can mean that if your plan has provisions that are less standard or a little bit outside of the norm, that can create some additional concerns and confusion as the automation doesn't work as well with those sort of more complicated plans. So as we've seen operational efficiencies increase, I think broadly speaking, plan sponsors have seen a benefit from that, but it can create some real tangles and messes if that automation doesn't work perfectly. And as I've said, we've seen those additional revenue opportunities. We've talked about that quite a bit. We've seen an increase in managed accounts. We've continued to see an increase in product creation related to lifetime income and annuities. And we expect both of those pieces to continue. One of the reasons many of you are here, likely, is that you have heard about these excessive fee cases that have continued to proliferate really over the last 5 years or so. Those cases are ongoing. We continue to see new excessive fee cases filed, although the pace has slowed somewhat. Many of those have met with settlements rather than going to a full jury trial. And those settlements include monetary payments, as you would expect. Those settlements also have included non-monetary provisions, and we've been able to use those non-monetary provisions to put together a handful of what we would consider best practices for plan sponsors looking to shore up their defenses from a future excessive fee case. So here is an example. This is from, I think, 2021, the Columbia University settlement. And these are a list of the non-monetary settlement provisions. So I'll go through them in a little bit of detail. So the first being mandatory annual training for plan fiduciaries. Clients in Multnomah Group will be familiar with our annual fiduciary training program. We try to show to any potential future litigants or the Department of Labor that plan fiduciaries have been trained on their responsibilities and understand the duties they have to the plan. Really critical component. We think the most educated fiduciaries certainly are the best. We want to make sure that you have all the information needed to make sure that you can make informed decisions related to the plan. The next is pricing fees on a per participant or per account basis. So historically, especially for those 403B plans, record keeping fees have been hidden within investment fees. And so participants were paying wildly different total fees depending on how they were invested. And we've seen a move towards more transparent record keeping fees and more equitable record keeping fees. So participants are paying the same amount no matter how they are invested. So we do recommend that plan sponsors move to a more transparent, more modern, more equitable fee structure. If you have questions about that, please feel free to reach out to a Multnomah Group consultant, or as you go through these record keeping fee benchmarking, talk through your current pricing allocation to participants. Another critical component is, of course, making sure that you are in the lowest share class available to the plan so that your investment options are institutionally priced and the lowest cost available, really critical component of ensuring your investment fees are reasonable and in line with the market. You want to use an independent investment consultant and meet regularly. They said quarterly meetings. Again, an investment consultant and a retirement plan consultant can assist you in meeting all of the requirements of fiduciary to the plan. They also asked Columbia to conduct a request for proposal for record keeping and administrative services. We continue to see these settlements and cases state that regular benchmarking is not enough. And if you have not gone out for a competitive record keeper search in the last several years, it is time to do so. And benchmarking alone cannot ensure that your fees are reasonable. Another requirement was to inform current record keepers that they may not use plan data to sell non-plan products and services to participants. So again, that's leading back to that cross-selling of retail financial products. You want to make sure you understand how record keepers are using the detailed information they have about your participants in the broader scope of their business. And last but not least, this is important for 403B plans, especially that have legacy individual annuity contracts. You want to make sure that you are regularly informing participants of their ability to redirect assets from those frozen investment options to the new updated investment options. And if you have questions about that, again, please feel free to reach out to me or another Multnomah Group consultant. Alrighty, so let's imagine that you are a Multnomah Group client and you have just received our annual fee benchmarking, and oh no, our fees are above the expected range. You are not required to, frankly, do anything with that information, but we do think that it is important to document in your minutes, in your fiduciary file, that you have gone through a deliberative process to ensure that fees are reasonable. So if your fees are out of range, committees can choose to negotiate with their current service provider for either higher levels of service or lower fees, or both, right? Because again, we're trying to balance these two important components. That is typically the tact that most of our clients take. Hey, I'm out of range, let's go record keeper and see if we can sharpen our pencils. If that doesn't work, or it's been a while since you've done a record keeper search, or if you have reason to believe that a record keeper can't get to the place from a service and fee perspective that the committee deems is prudent, you can also go and solicit proposals from qualified vendors. We want to spend a little bit of time towards the end of this presentation talking about what an RFP looks like, what time and effort it takes from committee members and other members of the plan sponsor, and how Multnomah Group might be able to help. So here are some high-level potential benefits of a search. So beyond just the fiduciary requirement to monitor service and fees and papering your file with this important due diligence, you are also likely to receive either better services or lower fees, or both. As fees continue to compress, as we've discussed in detail, we've also seen the quality and number of services continue to broaden across record keeper providers. They are willing to take on more of the administration and compliance of the plan than they were in the past, and the technology and tools and options for participants continue to expand. So you're likely to you'll be able to test the market and test the quality of your current services around plan sponsor and participant technology, savings analysis tools, participant education, better potential products or investment options, and just better all-around service, whether that's responsiveness from your service team or the quality of the call center. Again, we continue to see these expand. And the search also puts the plan sponsor in the point of highest leverage with the incumbent or with a potential new provider. So that is the time to request those higher level of services that you deem appropriate for your plan and for your employees. This is an outline of the general process of how a search works. So first, you'll want to pick the people who will be responsible for the RFP, whether that is the regular committee, maybe that's a subcommittee, maybe that's a couple of the folks from a committee and folks from maybe HR, payroll, or finance. To start the project off, we typically need about an hour of committee time and about an hour of administration time. And that is to understand the goals and objectives of the search, get a couple of details of how the plan is run and processed and administered. Then Multnomah Group will develop a request for proposal based on the specifics of your goals and your timeline and what you and your employees need, and make sure that it is custom to your plan. We will provide that to you for review, and then we'll send it out to those pre-qualified vendors. We recommend pretty strongly that you, when you're able, don't send it to the entire world of record keepers in the marketplace. We want to match the plan's needs and the plan's requirements with specific record keeper strengths. And so we typically send RFPs to between 4 and 6 record keepers, depending on the specifics of the plan. Record keepers respond, they may have some questions. Multnomah Group handles all of that back and forth, and then ultimately receives the proposals and puts together an analysis, really comparing apples to apples, the differences in the proposed services and fees. We meet with that vendor search committee to review that analysis, answer questions that you have, understand any potential follow-up, and then ultimately select finalists for interviews. We do recommend that you interview finalists before a final selection. We will help coordinate all of those finalist presentations and get the agenda set, the materials, all those things. Meet with the finalists, understand and hear directly from them on their services, and really let them make their case for their record keeping and administration to the plan. And ultimately select a vendor, whether that's staying with your incumbent, maybe instituting new fees or services, or moving to a new record keeper, which requires a transition. Typically, this search process that you see outlined here takes 3 to 4 months, and then a transition, if one is necessary, will take another 4 or 5 months, depending on the speed at which you would like to move and the availability of the record keeper, both the new record keeper and the prior record keeper's timelines. As we wrap up here, and if you've got questions, again, I hope you are thinking about them, and feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. A couple of things I wanted to plug as options if any of this has piqued your interest so far. So if you're a normal Multnomah Group client, you are likely to receive our fee benchmarking this quarter. If you haven't yet, contact your consultant and see when you all are meeting. But we also have a fiduciary training on our fee benchmarking process that goes into all of those details. We'll provide that as part of the materials when we send those out after this webinar. So again, if you read through this, have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Another piece for folks who are maybe not Multnomah Group clients, but are concerned that their fees are not in line with the marketplace, we do offer complimentary fee benchmarking. So again, if you're interested in that, it takes very little information from you all. We can do them relatively quickly. So please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to talk through what key data points are needed and what that might look like. So if you're interested in a complimentary fee benchmarking, please, again, feel free to reach out to me. And those are our last disclaimers. I'll leave those up for our compliance folks as I see if we have any questions. While we're waiting for that, one thing I have had many of my clients ask recently is, I feel comfortable with the fees that are being paid to the record keeper, but I'm not sure how best to allocate those to participants. And as we discussed earlier, the two most common structures are per person, so the same cost per individual, or asset-based, so the same amount, but a percentage of someone's total plan balance. We think those are typically the most transparent and can be equitable in different ways. So the per head, it aligns most closely with the costs that record keepers have for running the plan. And so every person who is receiving, frankly, the same services from the record keeper would be paying the same amount. That can mean that individuals with smaller account balances are paying a larger portion of their total balance than someone with a really large balance. And so some plan sponsors don't think that that is as equitable and have moved to an asset-based fee. So let's say, for example, all the participants pay 10 basis points or a tenth of 1% of their total plan balance every year. That means that folks with higher balances pay more, folks with smaller balances pay less, but it is the same percentage of their total plan balance. I think either are reasonable, either have merit. You just want to walk through your participant plan demographics and understand and maybe do some modeling on what that might look like for the specifics of your employee base. But I think either are defensible. Alrighty, I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat. Certainly, as you think about this and have any, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm happy to talk about this in more depth or any of the other Multnomah Group services that we can provide. And with that, I will wish you a good rest of your day, and I hope you get a little bit of this sunny summer weather we're having. Thank you.